absolute value equations. Just literally an equation with an absolute value in there. So let's say I gave you this. Absolute value of x equals 4. In other words, and just reason through this one, and then we'll do some that you just solve. What can you take the absolute value of and get 4? Well, you could plug in 4 and get 4, or you could plug in -4 and get 4. So whatever is inside the absolute value marks, that can either be positive or negative, because the absolute value would always make it positive. So like if I had absolute value of x equals 6, it's 6 and -6. If I had, let's say they start getting a little tricky, absolute value of x plus 1 equals 7. Well, this one, and you'll remember these if you've done these before, if you're in Algebra 2 or above, that absolute value to it answers. But in this case, I have x plus 1 could equal 7, but in the same tone of these, I can say x plus 1 equals -7. And then you just solve it like normal. Subtract 1, so x is 6. Subtract 1, x is -8. And you have two answers that work, because notice how 6 plus 1 is 7. -8 plus 1 is -7. Absolute value, +7. Let's do another one. X minus 3 equals 11. Same thing. First, you're going to write it as is. The x minus 3 equals 11. Then, x minus 3 equals -11. Solve for there. Add the 3. So, x equals 14. Add the 3. X equals -8. And you know, like normal, they try to be a little tricky sometimes. What about if I said x plus 4 minus 2 equals 10? Well, notice how this one I have this number outside. So if I want to make it by itself, all I have to do is move this over, and then, because once you isolate the absolute value, then you can write your two equations. So if I add the 2, absolute value of x plus 4 equals 12. And now it's just like the others. X plus 4 equals 12. X plus 4 equals -12. Subtract the 4 to get 8. Subtract the 4 to get -16. Now, just like with any other equation, let's say they put a number out front. Well, you are not distributing that. What you're doing is, first, just like if I had the equation 3x minus 1 equals 8, you're going to add the 1, divide by 3. Well, that's the same thing you're going to do here. Add the 1, so 3 times absolute value of x minus 6 equals 9. Divide by 3, because remember, your main goal is to get the absolute value all by itself so you can finish solving. So absolute value of x minus 6 equals 3. So x minus 6 equals 3 and -3. Add the 6, 9, 3. So you can do both things to it. If you've got a constant here on the end, you can add or subtract it, whatever you need to get it over. If you have a coefficient out front, you can divide by it before you write your two equations. They could even do it to where you have something like 3x plus 7 plus 2x equals, we'll say 17. is the only difference is before you write it twice, I would just combine your like terms. So 5x plus 7 equals 17. And then once you get there, 5x plus 7 equals 17. 5x plus 7 equals negative 17. Subtract the 7 to get 10. Divide by 5, so 2. Subtract by 7 to get negative 24. Divide by 5. So that one we finally had a fraction. You knew they were coming, but we couldn't stick with just whole numbers. So that's that part. Now let's get just a tad bit weird. What about if I said the absolute value of x minus 2 equals negative 8? Well, what do you know about the absolute value? It is always, it's the distance away from 0, so distance is positive or considered positive. So can I have a negative distance? I cannot. So anytime you get the absolute value by itself, no negative out front, nothing else going on, equals a negative, it's automatically a no solution. Let's say that if I had absolute value of x minus 2 minus 4 equals negative 3. Don't get no solution happy, because when you add over the 4, you get x minus 2 equals 1, and then you can work it. X minus 2 equals 1, x minus 2 equals negative 1. So add the 2 to get 3 and 1. So if you can move over something and make it to where it equals a positive, it's normal. But if you can't move anything over and it's still absolute value equals a negative, no solution. And let's do one more messy one. Okay, here we go. 2x plus 9 equals... Now notice how this is the first one we've had of this. We have a variable outside the absolute value. Whenever this happens, there's always a chance you have something called an extraneous answer. An extraneous answer is just an extra answer. It's an answer that appears to work, but it doesn't. See, just like up here, if I were to say x minus 2 equals negative 8, x minus 2 equals 8, and ignore the negative and the fact that it doesn't exist, notice how you could still solve it and get negative 6 and 10. However, when you plug it in, negative 6 minus 2 is negative 8, but the absolute value is positive. So it doesn't work. Just like if you plugged in 10, 10 minus 2 is 8, but the absolute value of 8 is 8, not negative 8. So that's why it's no solution. So that's why you have to plug in at the very end whatever you get for x, plug it in here, and you don't even have to get a number. You're just making sure that whenever you plug in whatever you get for x, that this will not be a negative, because the absolute value can equal a negative. And it's just a quick thing. It's really no big deal. But, so we've got 2x plus 9. Remember, you write it as is first. But then for the other, 2x plus 9 equals, and just like we made the opposite, 1 and negative 1, we're going to say negative 8x plus 3. And then we're going to take the opposite. So 8x minus 3. Once you get there, it's a little more tedious. Add the 8x to get 10x. Subtract the 9, negative 6, so negative 3 over 5. And then for this one, well, let's move the 8x first. So negative 6x equals negative 12, so x equals 2. So when we plug in these, do they work? And remember, you don't need an exact number, but you just need to know, is this going to be a negative? So that doesn't exist. So when you plug in 2, you get negative 16 plus 3, negative 13. Absolute value equals a negative. 2 doesn't work. But with this one, if we had negative 3/5 times negative 8, that's going to be positive. We don't care what the exact fraction is, but just a negative times a negative is a positive, plus 3 is a positive, so negative 3/5 works. We'll do more of those in class, but just remember, if there's an x on the outside of the absolute value, that's the ones that you really have to watch for those extraneous answers. Sometimes they have them, sometimes they don't. Sometimes one works, sometimes they both work. But just be careful, as is the first time, the second time, opposite of both, and then solve like you would a normal algebra equation. Hope this was of help to you. Have a great day.